It's hard to present, actually. Let's start. Should we go through issue tracker?
Yeah, I was just going over some of those.
Who's gonna be presenter? John?
Oh yeah, I can do the presenting if you like.
I did pull request about run operation and parameters.
Okay, should we start there?
Yeah.
So SQL create export async operation. Excellent.
It's not expert but run, so we can start from simple one. So another PR which is called run, SQL run. So we finished that we want to apply the same pattern as SQL evaluate operation, yeah. So I refactored.
Okay.
Yeah, I refactored all this stuff, so now it's the same. So you can see it's like agent generated stuff. So you see what was before and what after. So we have a parameter. I think we forgot that inside parameter you can put the whole resource. That was our confusion point. So it shouldn't be just data type. It could be resource type. That's the unique feature of parameters.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you scroll down, yes, now it may work like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I tried to test it with SQL, but let's see here.
Oh, I'm just trying to think of how to test this. Yeah, okay. I'll see if I can pick this up and try it out. I don't think this breaks me because I don't think I have implemented the parameters. I think I've just implemented the rest of it. Okay. Cool. And what else have we got here? That one is not finished. And this is just the one about the repeat directive examples. Yeah, do you think we can merge this one? I think all this is how many examples do we have? Yeah, 2 examples. I think one of them is a code system with vehicle, car, truck, motorbike, etc. And showing that you can traverse a code system resource with repeat directive. And I think this one was a I think this one was already one that we already had, but I was filling it out a little bit more. So yeah, I think this is pretty minor. I think this was just an action that I took to add oh no, it is 2 new ones. 2 new examples for repeat. One's a questionnaire response and one is code system hierarchy. Okay. So keen to merge that one whenever. All right, should we move to issues?
Yeah, so I started doing synchronous export. Yeah, that's one This issue is coming if we compare our run operation with the evaluate operation from SQL. So they do return parameter resource as a response. And potentially we can return results of the query as a parameter resource. Maybe it's not the best encoding, but it is one of the possible encodings.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the idea. So should we add this? It could be even like FHIR format here, because it's going to be FHIR wallet response. Yeah. The problem with our run operation that we're returning something which is not FHIR. But if we wrap it into the parameters, then
Yeah, that's fine. Just collect another format. And if you ask for FHIR, you get it. Is there a default? Do you think?
yeah, that's default for evaluate operation in SQL. Yeah, so because it's essentially you can return anything with a parameter resource, almost anything. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually used to return things like this in pathling with parameters optionally. But I think that's fine. So we've got an issue here to just add it as like an additional format.
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
Maybe you can let's play the game like FHIR, guys. So let's put some comments. I don't know, Stephen, someone who like it, who don't like.
Sure. So
I forgot this mantra.
group resolved to add this as an additional output.
Persuasive.
Yes, for
You know,
so
persuasive. Or what was the call I was on? It was mod with persuasive, which I have no idea what that means. But.
So this is just for SQL query run.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we do have to sort of keep an eye on consistency between our operations as well.
Mm-hmm.
But let's just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, but this issue essentially brings us to another, I don't know, did I create it like, like evaluate operation, this 322. Yeah, because potentially we can describe how to run SQL query using library evaluate. And that's bring us closer to these quality measures and all this framework integration. Maybe we have to discuss this with the SQL guys. I don't know, do they consider evaluate like a general operation for all library code, like all libraries, or they only constrain it with the SQL? If not, so then we probably can do this bridge and describe. I don't think that we should throw away our run operation, but we can describe how evaluate operation for CRMI like engines can operate on top of our query.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think that is possible from what I understand, and I think we should do it.
Okay, so then I can discuss with the CRMI guys how to do it properly, and we'll make a probably separate page which just describe how SQL query should behave inside evaluate operation.
I mean, there's some missing parts though, isn't there? Sorry, Steve, you're probably more up with it than I am.
I'm not, but I was just gonna start. I mean, of the incompatible list, the first one is wrapping issues, no problem. The second one, the expression, that's solvable too. So is the third one.
We don't need expression, so we can just keep it.
Yeah. The only one that we don't have is subject, really.
That's the question. Yeah, we can introduce implicit parameter, and that's a question for expert. I want to rise after that. So
I just don't know how often that's used in SQL.
it's used all the time, and subject could be the patient or the group. And they did it like polymorphic, so it could be. And we potentially may support, and especially for bulk export of the query, do we want to support global patient parameter or the global group parameter? Yes, that's the question. So they slightly related. Do we want to introduce this implicit parameter? Yes, so not explicit, but implicit. That will limit the query and essentially the view definition to specific patient or to specific group. For the view definition expert, we added these parameters. We added patient and I don't remember group operation, like because it was in bulk expert.
So actually I'm getting a little bit confused here, because what does a library execute? So maybe I'm getting mixed up with a measure execution.
I think it's probably the SQL. There should be link one of the issues. Yeah. Maybe another one.
The previous one.
Let me search.
Yeah, because so a library execute, is that just executing? Yeah, what is that executing actually? A measure execution is like something with a numerator and a denominator and linking off to a library and things like that.
Yeah.
Hi, Gino. How you going?
Maybe Gino knows that.
Good. How are you? I know nothing. What are we
Gino,
talking
do you
about?
know about like $execute from SQL? Is it SQL specific or it's generalized stuff? $evaluate. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, evaluate is, I think, more specific. Let's see. Yeah, evaluate. There's a evaluate on measure, and I don't know of any other ones.
Yeah, it's called SQL library evaluate. Yeah, so it's that one. Yeah, exactly.
Well, there's that one. There's this, but that is specifically on the measure resource.
And what we're discussing, should we support with the SQL query the dollar?
Is it not going to depend on what execution engine you're using?
Well, it
For
should
executing the library.
Looks
Yeah,
like
it should be
it
able
has
to.
a SQL in the name, so it's kind of probably may work only for SQL. We can talk to SQL guys. Maybe we can abstract it. I don't know. Make it more
I'd probably
generic.
talk to Bryn Rhodes or somebody on CRMI.
Yeah. That's what we can ask, because here SQL even in the name. Yeah, so they say.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to change the name, because I think that that's too far down the road for that canonical URL to change.
And the official URL is the SQL library evaluate, so it's not just.
Yeah,
But
and that's why there is the generic evaluate, but right now it's only on measure.
on measure,
And even then, the operation ID is evaluate, but the name is measure evaluate. So, we could define one that is just SQL evaluate if we want to be specific, or we could say.
SQL evaluate, we do have a run operation and now the expert.
Yeah.
So but yeah, we probably can discuss maybe measure, evaluate is a good
Yeah. I mean, I think
opportunity for us.
asking Ren, what CQI thinks about expanding it. I do worry because the CQL library evaluate has a lot of CQL specific stuff in it.
Not so much. If we look just probably expression and maybe few other parameters, but not too much.
Um,
But there's still like some prefetch stuff. Yeah, I see.
yeah, when you look at operations, yeah, the CQL library evaluate has, I guess, private expressions might be generic. Even the descriptions, like the parameters, say that it's parameters defined in the CQL library or included libraries. Questions like using server data, I don't know, would be appropriate. Like, I don't know how we would evaluate SQL without it.
But maybe the measure evaluate even the better goal for us. So
Yeah, that one is more generic, but even then, that one is pretty specifically tied to the measure resource. Same thing.
And
That
John, I shared measure evaluate in the chat link.
Yep. Yeah. And that one, the trick there is that it has a lot of things that are like location and reporter and stratifiers. And I don't know if we'll be able to translate those for SQL.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't probably even need to do that if we don't have that.
Yeah.
Yes. Does this make sense though for what you're doing with SQL? I'm just thinking, it's not exactly the same evaluation.
Yeah, I
Can
guess we're
you-
just trying to align where we can. I guess the part that I'm missing is what is an expression?
The expression in
Because
SQL is an entry point because it's a kind of library, and you need to choose the entry point, like specific expression which will be evaluated at the end and which will produce a result because it's a kind of library. So and you calling function from the library. So that's a metaphor for the SQL. In our case, we have one query, yeah, so we don't need expression.
well, I don't see how it necessarily should be any different. I was just having a look at this, which is how the CQL, like if they run their thing and they come back with, I guess, a collection of values. This is how they map it to the FHIR parameters. Yeah, we actually used to do something similar in Pathling to get a result from that back into a FHIR parameters in effectively a tabular parameters. But yeah, okay, maybe we just stew on this one a little bit. So yeah, to what extent can we sort of execute a SQL query using this paradigm, and what are the bits that don't fit potentially?
Or maybe we should target the measure evaluate, not the SQL library evaluate. It's because that should be generic, yeah. So the SQL is not hard coded in measure evaluate, yeah.
Well, so if we were to do this one, we would have to have some additional concepts, right? So a runner would have to understand all this stuff. Like numerators, denominators.
What? Opposite measures, proportion measures. I mean, there's a lot to this.
Yeah.
Fine.
I mean,
Group, a lot.
Like
I think it's overkill for what you're trying to do. Because this is very centric, in my opinion. How it's all evolved with QMEG and CQI is very centric to what, CMS does with its quality measures program. If you look through it, you can really, really see that.
I mean, there actually is no reason that you can't use SQL to achieve some of this stuff. And actually, we have had as one of our goals to kind of demonstrate some of that. But I feel like we need to do a little bit more thinking about this and potentially have like a target use case, which we can sort of pressure test some of the edges of this. So I think this is a bigger ticket.
And just to clarify, I agree on the CQL, on some of the operations, we're very specific into, the CQI IP is where I think it might get sticky.
What's the predominant evaluation method? Is it typically on measure or is it on library or both?
No.
Do you know?
Typically on measure, but most of the measures are going to be using some of the, standard libraries that are published now. So, we'll be executing those as well, there's a lot of interdependency.
Yeah, so my understanding is that logic is like the reusable modules of logic for like, coming up with sort of the underlying data concepts, I guess, and then you pull that into a measure to say, what portion of people have, had a HbA1c. What proportion of type 2 diabetes people had a HbA1c in the last 6 months or whatever would be like the measure. And the library would be used to kind of encapsulate some of those concepts, like how do we maybe get the people with a certain type of condition in the first place, or how do we pull out the lab results? Is that am I sort of on the right track there, Gabe?
Sort of. Yeah, you are. So there's a standard FHIR, just say FHIR measure that just kind of offers a lot of just very general functions for working within CQL. Others that are more geared towards, for example, the data model, CQI core. And then there's tailored measures coming from different stewards like NCQA. They may put some things together. There may be things for, inpatient versus outpatient. There may be things, centric to claims that NCQA does for HEDIS. But if you go out to the common SQL artifacts, I think that's the IG, there's a host of libraries that you'll see used in these measures over and over and over again. Or if you've got access to the MADI tool, it's another place you can see them. And there's different stewards governing them, but usually it's NCQA. Paladin, my former organization, has I think the AHA heart, cardiac library, and just stuff like that. But yes, you're absolutely on the right track.
Yeah, so I guess what we're trying to do,
consolidating the measures. I'm sorry, a way just consolidating the measures so that you're not putting a whole bunch of redundant code over and over again in the primary library, aka the measure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really helpful. Yeah, I guess what we're trying to do is imagine a sort of heavily simplified version of this, because to me, I can imagine a way of, for example, calculating the number of patients that have had a HbA1c done in the last 6 months for type 2 diabetes using a set of SQL on FHIR views over, say, US core, using views and a very simple piece of SQL. And I guess part of what we're talking about here is, okay, how do we wrap that up? The views, the SQL, and the thing that actually pulls the answer out of that, I guess.
Yeah.
Using the sort of same consistent resources that the clinical quality people use, so that we can not be inventing something new there.
Yeah. I think, again, I think some of the underlying structures for human quality measures I see are, well, probably QMake more. But I do think because of this, I think we should get together, or, whoever you guys deem, are the right brains to get on this and get on a call with Bryn Rhodes, because he pretty much is the architect behind all of that. What anybody says is other people have been in all of that. Bryn, and he has more than we'll probably ever know. Over decades. So I definitely would be curious to, get his opinion on all of this. I have my opinion where I'm thinking, well, I understand conceptually and I agree, but I also know a lot about these IDs and what's under the hood and the operators and the evaluation engines and translators and so forth, and how complex it is. And I think, it needs to be pulled into the conversation. That's my 2 cents for what it's worth. Maybe what it's worth.
That's good. I visited few meetings here, my half year, so we can speak. But is it worth to play that game?
Yes, I'm wondering why would we need to re-implement, isn't that an implementation detail in this case? When you talk about evaluate measure, you're pointing to a library. And I thought the whole point of being able to wrap the library was to say we can swap out CQL without dealing with all this. Because if we just have a library that's full of SQL and it returns, it's the same operation, because we're not going to call the CQL specific one, but we would call measure evaluate.
Yep.
And if the library is running SQL, I mean, we could have it run JavaScript underneath in library, to evaluate a measure. It doesn't matter. The point is that the measure report comes back the way you expect it to.
I think the thing is that when we talk about measure, we start getting into all the DSL complexity effectively. I don't think we're...
Do you feel that it is complex? I think most of these fields is just a meta, and finally you're getting nominator, or how we call it, enumerator and denominator, and 2 numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my thing is, if the idea is to have a parity with the thing we could evaluate in CQL and say we can evaluate in SQL, then it should be transparent at this layer. I think, right? Because we're just talking about a different layer. So we don't need our own evaluate measure. We use the existing evaluate measure, and we try to write a couple of libraries that we need that give the same results.
Yes, that is the goal, I think, Gino. I guess we still haven't really figured out at what level we want to do that.
Maybe I can do research and you guys can do research and we can discuss, so how it will work. So I did manual experiments, so we discussed this for many years with Bryn and CQA guys. So I did manual experiments when I took the measure, which was written in SQL, and manually translated into efficient SQL.
Yeah.
I did 5 or maybe 10 times, and it was successful. It's different. You usually look at this from the different point of view, so it needs some manual stuff. It's not one-to-one, because.
And
sorry.
isn't there already translation support for CQL to SQL? I thought. I have to ask.
So my experiments end up that you should think SQL way if you want to write efficient SQL. And the SQL is
Great.
more similar to like eager JavaScript execution. So
Yeah.
they live on a different level. So they can share 80%, maybe like some declarative parts, but the rest 20% usually you make different decisions for SQL. Maybe somebody is
That's
able to
fair.
write very smart converter, but from my point of view, the LLM can easily do that if
Yeah.
you learn and if you have a test, prove that the
Yeah.
SQL program is equivalent to the SQL.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and don't forget the view layer part, right? So the part that I think simplifies this and makes this better and more possible is that we have a set of views that we're running the SQL over, which is exactly what the NCQA guys were experimenting with, is breaking down the problem of turning just the SQL into SQL, breaking that down into two parts and saying, well, what are all the data requirements, and creating views to extract all that out using view definitions, and then taking the result of those view definitions to the actual answer using SQL. So that means that the SQL is much simpler because it doesn't have to like reach in and do all the FHIR specific stuff. It's just working off a very simple set of, rectangular tables. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to, is a demonstration of that. But I don't think that sort of I'm not sure adopting all the logic in, say, this measure resource is where we want to go. I think we're really just looking for a more thin wrapper, but I think we need to think about it a little bit more. So maybe we just keep this on the agenda for maybe next.
Let's do research and come back when we will understand more details.
Yeah.
And
I see that anything I can research?
Yeah, sorry.
Is there anything I can research for you? Let me know, John or Nikolai.
Yeah, sure. I think we can like read more about this stuff and try to think how it will look if we will use SQL and what the complexity behind. Yeah. So because now I think John is scared by this huge measure resource. Maybe
it
not.
Is.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, there's all kinds of measures. It's really complex. Multiple populations within measures, within types of measures, composite measures, which are kind of like even composite measures where there's more than value. Hemoglobin A1C and attention property, put exam and fulfill exam and so forth. Into a lot here. So, if we're gonna, try and, translate completely, it is big. It is a big job. It absolutely is. So that's why I think
Meaning the complexity of the logic, yes, and now we're discussing the complexity.
And the structure too. The structure too as well, right? Not big.
Complex as well, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's because there's a temptation. We can just provide like a SQL query run and SQL query export, and people can do everything with that. Yeah. So should we play this complex game if we can just provide two straightforward operations and people can do whatever
that's my thought exactly. That's exactly my thought. It's again, I emphasize this as my opinion and, my 2 cents, maybe what it's worth. But, in my opinion, a lot of the measured stuff has gotten really, really centric to, what CMS does with the annual measures. And, when I led my use case for oncology for Codex, and, that was a real problem because there was a lot of stuff we're doing over there for, private measure development collections for things like ASCO and ASCO that just don't care about it. It was a headache. Something.
Question on that. What's the real world current situation on this? I imagine in a lot of these organizations, all the data that's needed to drive all this logic is probably in a variety of SQL databases. Everyone has its own schema that's grown up over the years by each organization. And here is SQL imposing another logic layer on top of that. What do people really want to do? Are they saying, it would be great just to be able to provide some views on what we have and a more of a thin layer of like sort of like what we're trying to do with view definitions here? Is that what people are really saying?
I think so. I'm flashing back to Chicago a couple of years ago, some of the conversations I had with people I found. So you've got, first of all, big school thought and saying, all right, there's, hundreds of thousands of people out there probably that are fluent, in SQL. And I don't want to say SQL, but SQL, right? Whereas, CQL is, much more complex. You've got to know a lot more, about the IGs, about different libraries, about different functions. You've got to know the translator. You've got to bring your own evaluation engine, et cetera, et cetera. It's way more complex. And this is my opinion again too, but we are the biggest, health provider in the country, right? So we've got huge repositories of data. We've got our own HIE with QHIN, access to the Commonwealth. So, we can get pretty much patient encounters from anybody, not only within our hundreds of hospitals, but anywhere within the United States. We have, a huge DDW, right? It would be really nice, to just be able to basically translate, FHIR data from, from the HIE, without having to basically go through a big ETL and transformation layer and all that stuff, just to basically get to the same place. So if I could, and I'm talking what I'm thinking from my split, if I could do some kind of use case here to the organization that, hey, look what we can do right over, our HIE, using FHIR APIs with this tooling, maybe that saves us a heck of a lot of work, right? Anyway, just a thought. And I don't think we're alone in thinking that. The bottom line is, you've got all these different either FHIR servers or FHIR interfaces and layers that, people would love to be able to, query without having to go through a big ETL transformation layer and get into an EDW to get to the same place. Over. My 2 cents, and based on what I'm seeing and what my experience is, the right thing was a DBA and formally.
Interesting.
I think that's exactly what we're working on. So stick with us.
Okay, you stuck with me then, I guess. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just I think the homework is what is this SQL library evaluate actually for? Who's using it? What's an example of what you would use this for? I think. I think from what I can see, theoretically, we could map what we've got into this, but I just want to understand, is that of value?
Yeah, I can go to
should you?
next ask.
Are you familiar with the Maddie tool? That who is it? ICF, I think, is responsible for that. And that is the GUI tool basically for developing measures, and basically all these CMS measures. I can give you a demo if you want. all the CMS measures, get annual measures get built with that. You can pick which data model you want to, be based on. So whether that's QI Core, US Core, base FHIR, or the old stuff, whatever it was, QDM, which was not FHIR, right? And develop measures in there, put your test cases together. Depending on what data model you're using, you may have to know some JSON to do that, or you may be able to do a drag and drop. But anyway, that is basically, you're going to go in there, you're going to put in all your metadata, and you're going to put together your primary library, right? And that's going to have all the includes to the supplemental libraries we were just talking about. You're going to have all your SQL logic in there. You're going to have your metadata about your different groups and populations. What type of measure is this? What type of scoring is this? All the stuff you see in here. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it. Okay, but basically, if you look at the QMIG-IG, which is now using base objects in CRMI, but you're going to see that there's a readable library for that measure, and then there's a computable library, and there's an executable library. Okay, you've got to basically see how this works. But anyway, the steps are going to be, once I've got this measure put together, either in Matty or some other tooling I could put together by hand. I could use Brin's VS Code or whatever I'm using. And the first step is that's got to go through the translator, right? That's got to go through the SQL translator. Then, okay, assuming that all works, I've got a package to all of these profiles in the IG, and then I'm going to have an evaluation engine, possibly MITRE's, or again, Bryn has one that he developed, and I've heard that who is it, FHIR may have one now, and I think NCQA is working on one, but there's a number of different evaluation engines out there to actually execute this package once it gets done. And part of that execution is going to be putting together the data requirements, right? For basically everything that this measure needs to execute, depending on what's in that CQL. If you're looking at encounters, if you're looking at medication requests, different various observations or labs and so forth. It is complex. That's what I'm really trying to say here, and that's why I really think we have to have a good understanding of what is all in these various profiles, and what the operations are doing, and what the different pieces of the tooling are responsible for, before committing to something of this enormity. That, again, my 2 cents, maybe what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And the big hurdle that you're seeing from an HCA perspective is just the IT project of installing one of these engines versus
Well, we're not really
no?
looking to execute measures. We can already do that, right? In fact, we are one of the NHSN trial sites. If you know about that with the CDC. So we can, basically offer FHIR APIs in dbMotion, which is what our HIE is based on. We can, evaluate a measure. We can do a bulk export. We can get the data. We can do that. But what we're really saying is, okay, if we've got all this data out there coming from, again, encounters from approximately 300 hospitals, and that's just our inpatient. We've got urgent care centers, outpatient, ambulatory practices, et cetera. Okay, but we've got all this data, and we've got FHIR layers to support FHIR APIs, and basically, where it's not stored natively in FHIR, but effectively we can see any of it in FHIR. What would be really nice would be to just be able to write CQL instead of having to, have all these APIs or bulk exports and whatever, and translating, all this, embedded, nested, complicated JSON, over to, a relational structure, in an EDW in the cloud. So it would just, it's not really necessarily fill validation measures. Maybe I just want to pull, all the patients that had, an MI at a, certain date, what dimensions would you use? Date, facility, maybe physician group, and I want to see, what the outcomes were. It's not necessarily a CMS quality measure or a HEDIS quality measure. It just maybe my own internal reporting, but heck, we've got hundreds of people here that could write that in SQL, and probably 5 people here who might be able to write it in CQL. Does that make sense?
None of them
Yeah.
can do SQL.
On a good day, if you give them enough coffee. Yeah. So
exactly.
not everything is a measure, and you
Yeah.
and
It's a good thing.
there's
And
FHIR
that's
data
exactly,
there.
our motivation.
Yeah.
We talk
I mean,
about reports, dashboards, and it should be easy.
Yeah. Yeah. And my opinion is, there's a niche over there for CMS quality measures with, not just, all of the MADI tooling and translators and, evaluation engines and all that stuff. But, there's people working on other things. I don't know who it was that just was demoing CQL Studio or whatever, they're putting together with that. There's different things emerging there to fit that particular niche for quality measures. That's what it is. It's a niche, right? But, there's a whole lot more to what we can do with, just basically getting, a holistic record out of patient, than just what I'm going to do with, what I would call almost a commodity quality measure. Or let's flash back to, oncology or genomics, right? Where this stuff is going to get really complex, the reporting. You don't really necessarily want the burden of having to, follow this, tedious structure of a quality measure when all you really want to do is, again, it's fairly straightforward reporting on, a particular population with, different genomics or what, whatever else. So again, my 2 cents.
It's more than 2 cents.
So,
Well, I'm trying to be modest. I've been around the block a few times. Anyway, on another note, is anybody going to HEMS next week? So I was going to be there, and I was going to see if I could meet up with any.
My partners will be on HIMSS. Yeah, let's
All right.
contact.
All right. I'll take a look and see if I see anybody from Health Samurai there.
Quite lazy to fly.
Okay. Yeah.
I stopped going when I didn't have to anymore.
Yeah. I usually only go when I'm presenting, but this year I'm just going for a couple of days. So.
Are you going to Rotterdam for working group meetings?
Oh no, actually, I would never pay for that. I would love to, but yeah, they're never going to pay for that. You probably got a DP, but definitely not international. I don't know if it's in Toronto, they might pay for it, but certainly not Europe. I probably need to get on some kind of, co-chair or something on one of these work groups, so that I have to go. That's the only way I'm going to get there.
We can make you co-chair of SQL and FHIR.
Okay, I'll run. I'll run. Absolutely.
Whatever works. It's not getting any easier to get people together. That's
No,
for sure.
no. Doesn't look good. Absolutely.
All right. So we'll have a bit more of a think about that one. Maybe we'll just keep going through this next couple and just get them straight in our heads, and then we'll probably be at about at time anyway. So
That's a simple issue. So there was discussion about get parameters, and we should answer. We can just say only post, yeah, for run operation. But get may work because it's a kind of search. Yeah, it's read, so it's query. So it may sounds like natural to support get, but there is no consensus how the parameters can be passed because they are nested, and there was discussion on Zulip that potentially we can mix nested parameters, but I'm not sure. It's just a little bit aesthetic stuff. Maybe we can just give up and say only post. But
yeah, or can you still do like a simple get that maybe doesn't have parameters? Or
yeah, if no parameters, yeah, we can say there's a get, or maybe we can, I don't know, Gina, what do you think? So is there any way to pass parameters?
Yeah, we refined that in operation definite and the operation stuff as far as like being able to run a get is essentially if you can represent it via, and we just reused the ones we did for search.
Yeah.
So if it's, if you're trying to pass in things and they have a representation, great, you can use get. And if not,
Yeah, there's a problem in our case because it's like a double. So we have a library which have a parameters. And then we have
Mhm.
operation like SQL query run,
Yep.
which refer the library. Yeah, so and we
Mhm.
want to pass parameters to the library, not to the operation. Yeah, so and that's why we're using, like in SQL Evaluate, second level parameter, which is called parameters, and we're passing
Mhm.
parameters to the second level of nesting. So the question is there any legal way to make these parameters top level and pass to the get operation, or if there is no, okay, so let's just go with the post.
I mean, if we say they're top level in our definition, then they're top level. I mean, we can say whatever we want when we're defining it. So if we say they're top level and we have ways to disambiguate and all that kind of stuff, and we just say whenever you run into a collision, it fails and you can't do a get, you know, we could say that. I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. You know, are there enough simple cases where we want to do that it makes sense to add support and have everyone determine if it's possible or not? Or is it just, oh, this is something cool, but not necessarily needed?
Another question from my side to you, Gina. So the SQL guys are using this pattern, so they putting extra parameters, yeah, in as a second level, and they essentially described in library, but there is no official connection here with a nested parameter. It's just a text in the spec, yeah, so that you can pass parameters which are defined in the library. So there's no way to describe it with a machine readable, yeah.
Yeah.
We discussed that this in FHIR there's a hack with how it's named queries, yeah,
Yeah.
which can do that. But is there any other hacks?
I mean, what do you want? Now we can define whatever we want. We have an incubator IG now. We can do whatever we want.
But if the library has a parameters and you want to define the operation on top of library which accept these parameters somehow, maybe
that's not going to be something you can do in a get realistically. I mean, we could define a syntax and a format and how you do it and, you know, prefixing the name that you put and, you know, so you know which library to pass it to and all that kind of stuff. But
it's not only about the get, even for the post, because essentially we're saying that when you're calling this operation on this library, the parameters are defined in a library, not in operation. So it's like transferring library parameters into the generic operation. I don't know how to, it's like how to describe it. Do you get it?
Not completely, no.
So we have a run operation.
Yeah, I have this.
Which is run on top of library. Library has a parameters. And what we want that when you call the run operation, you can pass parameters to the library.
Yeah.
And we're doing this with the parameters with a nested parameter resource. Nested parameter in parameters.
Yeah.
So that means, do you understand? We have one generic operation run, which may be run on different libraries which define different parameters.
When we have, okay, so if we look at, I mean, there's nothing out of the box necessarily, but we're defining the operation. And so I could see putting some syntax similar to how we describe chaining if we really wanted something like this. So that you have something like the library name / ID dot parameter name dot, you know, and so you could expand them that way because you're stuck with just the simple key value pair. So you would need to make sure that you have that. It'll be pretty verbose if you have even a few repetitions of things, because that syntax doesn't let you group anything. But you could construct a URL, you know, that it's, lib1 dot params dot key equals a, and lib1 dot params dot value equals 1 2 3 or 1 2 4 and dot dot dot, and you could keep constructing them that way, but you definitely wouldn't want to do that for more than a couple of parameters.
Yeah. Let me reformulate another question. So is there a way to say that the profile for nested parameters will be taken from library, even if it's post?
Nested parameters.
Yeah, so we have a run operation. It has nested parameters parameter, which is essentially will be passed to the library.
Yeah,
And we want to say that
Yeah.
this parameter will be taken from library in operation definition. In operation definition, we're saying that parameter should be taken from library parameters.
Yeah.
I can maybe describe it in Zulip if it's hard.
Yeah. I mean, you could define a parameter that is a canonical reference or even a regular reference and say, instead of giving you, lib1 params, blah, 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 you could do something to say like lib1 dot source equals, dot, dot, dot. Because the thing is that whoever's implementing the operation needs to understand what we're saying. All we're doing when we're passing the parameters is saying, what can we pass into an operation that it understands it? And in this case, what we're trying to do, it kind of breaks operation definition, but it's enough of a gray area that we could get away with it if we wanted to do some of these weird things. But if we're going to do that, then I would just say like we define a set of parameters when you want to do that it's lib source equals URL, and then you can just pass that as a normal parameter, and then it's just the URL you're passing, and you're done.
I know, John, Steve, do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think what you're trying to say is in the operation definition for, say, SQL query run, you want to be able to say the parameters for this are, or some of the parameters for this are defined over here. So in this thing, we've got parameter definitions, but we're not putting these parameter definitions directly in the operation definition for SQL query run, but we want to go get them from somewhere else. But I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah. It's like generics. So the operation is configured with the library as a type, and that's describe the parameters. Is there any something like that in FHIR?
So in library, the parameter like that is using parameter definition.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is you want to just use that same parameter definition in
For generic operation, yeah, which will be reconfigured depending on what parameters defined in the library. I think that's what guys did in SQL, but I know it's just in text, so it's not machine readable.
So if you build a profile on those parameters, so if the library has a profile, that it's library parameter profile, just call it library parameter profile for sanity, then you could say in the operation definition, your input profile is that same library parameter definition.
Yeah, but we have a generic operation where the name of library is a parameter.
You just create a derived operation for that.
Yeah.
Because the problem is that if you were saying that we have 4 different libraries that we want to have those input profiles for, you can't have them all stubbed in the same operation. Because there's no way to parse that. So you would need to say, if I'm trying to run something that is specific to, the HEDIS library, and I want to be using that input profile, then I would have, run HEDIS, which is a derived operation on run SQL. And it specifically says my input profile is the HEDIS library input profile. Because if not, we can't disambiguate if you have the HEDIS measures and the CMS measures or something like that. We wouldn't be able to disambiguate which profile you're using. And yeah. So the only way to add those profiles is to make new operation definitions, which can just be derived. So they don't need to define much of anything because it can be parents, children of run SQL.
Well, this maybe sounds too complicated. Maybe we will keep it just in the text. Yeah, John, what do you think? And Steve, because it's
We can prototype. We need a good example on a prototype to get it in my brain wrapped around what you're trying to do, Nikolai.
We can just describe that the parameters should be validated against library parameters. Yeah, so just a message in the text. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the real thing is late bind the profile.
Yeah.
It has to be at the operation definition. And so if you want to specify a specific profile for your parameters, it has to be when you're defining the operation. And I don't think there's any other way around that. If you want the definition to work. If you're saying we just have the generic run that takes in, the name of, or the URL to the view definition, and then it appends all those parameters and forwards them, we just don't have any way to validate them. We can
That's
make
essentially how named queries are working. Yeah. If you look inside named queries, so the name of the query define parameters. So, so inside named queries, it works that way. But you create operation definition for each named query. Yeah. So and then but you run it like generic operation, just query name and parameters.
Yeah, and so that's why you can do the same thing here, and you could say, but that's why you need to create the separate operation definition for each one of them, which is the named query, because the named query is just an operation definition.
Yeah.
So
it's a special kind of operation definition, yes. Or type, I forgot, it's a type, yes.
Yep.
All right, so I think we've run out of time and I'm going to have to go anyway. But yeah, we think we might have to have a think about this one and maybe come back to it next meeting and see if we can figure out a way forward on it. All right. Yeah. Well, anything else that anyone wanted to say before we wrap it up for this week?
Yeah, I would love to invite everybody to Agents on FHIR. So on Thursday, take a look at Agents on FHIR channel in Zoom.
Tuesdays, right?
Okay.
I'll be there. I think I'll be there this week.
Yeah, and I think we're going to start alternating time zones, John. So that should work better for you. Alternate weeks will have better times for other people.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I will try to make it. I'm just a little bit under the pump this week because I've got a connectathon to next week, and I'm trying to. Yeah. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a good week, and we'll talk next week or at the next meeting we're all on.
Yeah, you guys. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
See
Thanks
you
later.
Cheers.
Bye.